There's a moment when you realize the people you love most see you only as a shadow in the room, a presence, not a person. I remember the day I saw my life as it truly was, a long, silent sacrifice, taken for granted by those I called family. I didn't cry, scream, or beg when they betrayed me. Instead, I sat still, watched, and let my mind work. In that silence, a slow, steady determination grew inside me. I'm Evelyn Parker, 62 years old, and this is my story. Not just of what they did, but of how I took back my dignity, exposed their secrets, and turned the tables for good. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like mine. Mom, where's my blue shirt? Mark's voice echoed from upstairs, the same demanding tone he'd used since he was 12. I folded the last towel from the morning load and called back. In your closet, second. Shelf. I don't see it. Of course he didn't. I climbed the stairs, my 62-year-old knees protesting with each step. Mark stood in his doorway, hair disheveled, looking exactly like the entitled 30-year-old man-child he'd become. Right here, I said, pulling the shirt from where it hung behind his jackets. Thanks, he mumbled, already turning away. No eye contact, no acknowledgement that I'd just solved his problem while he stood there helpless. Mark, we need to talk about. Can't now, Mom. Late for work. He grabbed his keys and was gone, leaving me standing in his doorway like a discarded service. This was my life. 40 years of marriage, 3 children, and countless sacrifices, all reduced to being the invisible woman who kept everyone's world spinning while they forgot I existed. Evelyn! Richard's voice boomed from downstairs. Where's the checkbook? I found him in his study, surrounded by papers I'd organized just yesterday. The checkbook sat exactly where it always did, in the top right drawer of his desk. Here, I said, handing it to him. Thanks. Listen, I'm meeting with Hayes this afternoon about the property investments. Nothing for you to worry about. Nothing for me to worry about. Our property investments. The ones I'd researched, the neighborhoods I'd walked through, the deals I'd negotiated while he played golf with his buddies. Richard, I should be in that meeting. Those are my properties, too. He didn't look up from his papers. Hayes gets nervous when too many people are involved. You know how accountants are. I knew how Richard was. 40 years of marriage, and he still treated me like a child who couldn't understand grown-up conversations. Mom? Lily's voice came from the kitchen. My eldest daughter, 35, and sharp as a knife when it came to getting what she wanted. I found her rifling through the refrigerator. Hi, sweetheart. How's work? Exhausting. The partners are making impossible demands. She emerged with leftover casserole I'd made 3 days ago. Can I take this? David and I are too tired to cook tonight. Of course. I watched her package up food I'd prepared, planned, and paid for. Lily, I wanted to ask you about Thanksgiving plans. Oh, about that. David's parents invited us to Cabo this year. We're thinking of saying yes. My heart sank. Thanksgiving had been our tradition for 35 years. I'd hosted every single one, cooking for 3 days straight, while everyone else showed up, hungry and left full. But we always... Mom, you could come with us. Though it might be awkward since you don't really know David's family. Awkward, because spending Thanksgiving with strangers was preferable to the family dinner I'd been preparing my whole adult life. I'll think about it, I said, though we both knew I wouldn't be invited to Cabo. After Lily left with my food, I sat in the quiet kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals, packed countless lunches, hosted birthday parties and family gatherings. The kitchen where I'd cried quietly over the sink when the children were young, and I felt overwhelmed, where I'd celebrated their achievements and comforted their disappointments. Now it felt like a museum of my own invisibility. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie, my middle daughter. "Can you watch Emma tomorrow night? Date with Jake. You're the best." Sophie lived 2 hours away, but somehow I was still her first call for babysitting. Not because she wanted to spend time with me, but because I was free, reliable, and wouldn't charge her. I typed back, "Of course, honey." The house settled around me in the late afternoon quiet. Richard was still in his study, probably planning how to manage our money without my input. Mark was at his job, the one I'd helped him get through a friend's connection. Lily was home with David, eating the dinner I'd prepared. And I was here, surrounded by the evidence of a life spent serving others, who'd forgotten to see me as anything more than a convenience. I walked through the house I'd maintained for decades. The floors I'd mopped, the windows I'd cleaned, the rooms I'd decorated and redecorated to suit everyone else's changing tastes. In the hallway hung family photos spanning 40 years. Graduations, weddings, holidays, vacations. In every single picture, I was there. But somehow I looked like a shadow beside my vibrant family. When had I become so invisible? When had my voice stopped mattering in my own home? I found my old jewelry box on the dresser, the one my mother had given me when I married Richard. Inside, beneath the everyday pieces, lay the business cards I'd collected over the years. Real estate contacts, investment opportunities, legal advice from Janet Moore, my childhood friend who'd become a successful attorney. Janet had always told me I was sharper than I gave myself credit for. "Evelyn, you see things others miss," she'd said just last month over coffee. "You understand people, property, potential. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." But I had let them convince me. For years I'd accepted their version of who I was. Helpful, quiet, available. The woman who made everything work so they could take credit for their successes. I closed the jewelry box and looked at myself in the mirror. 62 years old, gray at the temples, lines around my eyes from decades of smiling while being overlooked. But behind those eyes was something they'd all forgotten. I was still here. I was still thinking. And I was done being invisible. "The coffee tastes different," Richard announced at breakfast, as if I'd personally failed him. I glanced at the same brand I'd been buying for 20 years. "It's the same coffee, Richard." "Maybe you're using too much water." He folded his newspaper with the sharp snap he used when he was annoyed. "Janet called you yesterday. What did she want?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Richard had never liked my friendship with Janet, especially after she became successful. "Just catching up," I said, refilling his cup. "She's not filling your head with nonsense about women's rights again, is she?" I bit back my response. Janet had been asking me about our financial arrangements, suggesting I should have more insight into our investments. Apparently, that qualified as nonsense. Mark stumbled into the kitchen, already reaching for his travel mug. "Mom, I need you to call the insurance company about my car. They keep giving me the runaround." "I can give you the number." "Just handle it. You're better at dealing with those people." Those people, as if customer service representatives were beneath him, but perfectly suited for me. "Mark, you're 30 years old. Maybe it's time." "God, Mom, don't start with the lectures. I'm already stressed about work." He grabbed a banana from the fruit bowl. "Speaking of which, can I borrow $200? Rent's due and I'm short this month." Richard looked up from his paper. Again. "Son, you need to learn to budget." "I know, Dad. It's just temporary. This new position should come with a raise soon. The new position I'd helped him get through, my connection with the Hendersons. But of course, his potential raise was due to his own merit. "I'll transfer it this afternoon," I said quietly. "Thanks, Mom. You're amazing." Mark kissed my cheek and was gone, leaving me with the same hollow feeling I got every time my children treated me like an ATM with emotions. "You're too soft on him," Richard said, but he'd already returned to his paper. I was loading the dishwasher when Lily called. "Mom, I need a favor." The phrase that started 90% of our conversations. "What is it, sweetheart?" "David's boss is coming to dinner next week, and you know how important this promotion is. Could you possibly make that amazing beef Wellington, the one you made for my birthday last year? Beef Wellington, 2 days of preparation, expensive ingredients, hours of careful execution. Lily, that's quite a lot of work. Please, Mom. You know I can't cook like you can. This dinner could change everything for David's career. David's career, never mind that I might have plans, commitments, or simply the desire to spend my weekend on something other than elaborate cooking for people who wouldn't even thank me. When is this dinner?" "Saturday night. I know it's short notice, but I just found out. You're literally the only person who can save me." "The only person? Because my time wasn't valuable enough to require more notice. I suppose I could." "You're the best. I'll pick it up Saturday afternoon. Love you." She hung up before I could change my mind or ask if she'd considered catering or, God forbid, ordering pizza and being honest about her limitations. I stood in my kitchen, holding the phone, feeling the familiar weight of expectations settling on my shoulders. Beef Wellington for strangers who would credit Lily with the meal, while I remained unnamed and unacknowledged. That afternoon I met Sophie for coffee. At 28, she was the most considerate of my children, but even our conversations followed predictable patterns. "You look tired, Mom," she said, stirring sugar into her latte. "Just busy. Lily needs beef Wellington for David's boss." Sophie's expression shifted slightly. "She's making you cook for her dinner party?" I offered to help. "Did you? Or did she assume you would?" The question caught me off guard. Sophie was studying my face with unusual intensity. "It's not a big deal," I said. "Mom, when's the last time Lily cooked for you? Or Mark? When's the last time any of us took care of you instead of the other way around?" I felt exposed under her gaze. "That's what mothers do, Sophie." "Is it? Because Jake's mom expects him to handle his own problems. She loves him, but she doesn't solve everything for him. Jake, Sophie's boyfriend of 2 years, came from a family that seemed to function differently than ours. They helped each other, but they didn't enable each other." "Every family is different," I said, but Sophie's words were lodging somewhere uncomfortable in my chest. "Mom, can I ask you something? Do you feel appreciated?" The question hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I wanted to cross. "Of course I do." "Really? Because from where I sit, it looks like everyone takes you for granted. Dad makes decisions without consulting you. Mark treats you like his personal assistant. And Lily only calls when she needs something." My coffee had grown cold. "They're just busy with their own lives. And what about your life? What about my life? When had I stopped having one separate from serving theirs? I have my volunteer work at the library, which you do for free while everyone else gets paid for their time and expertise." Sophie reached across the table and took my hand. "Mom, I love you, but watching how this family treats you makes me angry sometimes. Her honesty was more unsettling than comfort. I'd spent so many years normalizing my invisible role that having someone acknowledge it felt dangerous. "Things are fine, Sophie." "Are they?" She squeezed my hand. "When's the last time Dad took you on a vacation you wanted? When's the last time Mark helped you with anything? When's the last time Lily asked about your dreams instead of your cooking?" I couldn't answer because I couldn't remember. Driving home, Sophie's questions echoed in my mind. I thought about the business cards in my jewelry box, the property, deals I'd researched that Richard discussed with Hayes, as if they were his ideas. I thought about the holiday traditions I maintained single-handedly, the family memories I'd orchestrated and preserved, while everyone else simply showed up. At home, Richard was watching television, his feet up on the ottoman I'd bought last month. "How was coffee with Sophie?" he asked without looking away from the screen. "Fine." I sat beside him on the couch. "Richard, I was thinking we should plan a trip. Maybe that cruise to Alaska we talked about." "Alaska? In this economy? We need to be more conservative with spending right now." Conservative? While he'd just bought a new set of golf clubs and Lily had asked for help with her mortgage payment last month. "It doesn't have to be expensive." "Evelyn, let's be practical. We're not young anymore. Travel is stressful at our age." "Our age?" As if I were as fragile as he wanted me to believe. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man who'd grown comfortable with his version of our life. A version where I existed to make his world easier, while my own dreams collected dust. "I'm going to start dinner," I said. "Good." I invited Hayes over tomorrow to discuss the Morrison property. "Can you make that pot roast he likes?" Of course I could, because that's what I did. I made pot roast for men who discussed my properties without me. But as I stood in the kitchen pulling ingredients from the refrigerator, Sophie's questions wouldn't leave me alone. And for the first time in years, I found myself wondering what would happen if I stopped saying yes to everything and started asking why. "Evelyn, we need to talk." Richard's voice had that tone, the one he used when he'd already made a decision and expected me to agree. I looked up from the morning mail, bills I'd been sorting and organizing as I had for 40 years. "What about?" "Sit down." The kitchen chair felt cold beneath me as Richard positioned himself across the table, his hands folded like a businessman delivering news to a subordinate. "Hayes and I have been discussing our financial situation. With the kids needing help and the economy being uncertain, we need to make some changes." My stomach tightened. "What kind of changes?" "We're going to consolidate the properties, move everything into a family trust." "A family trust?" The words came out smaller than I intended. "It's smart planning, Evelyn. Tax benefits, estate protection." Hayes drew up the papers. I stared at him. "Without discussing it with me?" "I'm discussing it now." "No, Richard, you're telling me. There's a difference." His expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features. I rarely challenged him so directly. "Look, this is complicated financial stuff." Hayes explained it all, "but I don't want to burden you with the details. You just need to sign here." He slid papers across the table. I picked up the documents, scanning legal language that seemed designed to obscure rather than clarify. "I'd like Janet to look at these." "Janet?" Richard's voice sharpened. "Why would you involve her?" "Because she's a lawyer and these are legal documents affecting my property." "Our property. And Hayes is already handling it. We don't need another lawyer complicating things." But something in his tone made me fold the papers and tuck them beside my chair. "I'll read through these first." "Evelyn, I'll read through them first, Richard. The silence stretched between us, filled with something that hadn't existed in our marriage before. Open disagreement. That afternoon, Mark arrived unannounced, which usually meant he needed something. "Hey, Mom, Dad here?" "In his study." "Mark, what's going on? You seem—" "Just family stuff. Business things." He was already walking away, leaving me standing in the foyer like a stranger in my own home. I heard voices from Richard's study, low and urgent. The door was closed, but sound carried through the old house. "Has to sign." Richard's voice. "She's asking questions." Mark's reply. "Needs to happen before." I moved closer, my heart pounding with the guilt of eavesdropping and the fear of what I might hear. "Mom?" I spun around. Lily stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "I was just— The vacuum cleaner is in the closet near Dad's study. I was getting it out." Lily's eyes moved from me to the closed study door. "Dad asked me to come over. Said there were papers to discuss." "What kind of papers?" "Estate planning. You know, getting everything organized." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's responsible, Mom. Making sure everything's handled properly. Everything. As if I were already dead and they were dividing my possessions. Lily, those properties, the apartment building downtown, the rental house on Maple Street. I found those investments. I researched them, negotiated the deals." "I know, Mom. But Dad's better with the financial management side of things." "Better? Because I'd spent 40 years proving I couldn't manage my own affairs? I'd like to be part of these discussions." Lily's smile became strained. "Of course, but you know how these business meetings can be. Boring legal stuff. Dad's just trying to protect you from the stress." "Protect me by excluding me from decisions about my own property." The study door opened, and Mark emerged, followed by Richard. Both men looked serious, purposeful. "Oh, good. Lily's here," Richard said. "We can get this wrapped up." "Get what wrapped up?" I asked. "The trust paperwork. Hayes is waiting for the signatures." "I told you I wanted Janet to review— Evelyn." Richard's voice carried a warning. "Hayes is already here. Let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be." Hayes appeared behind them, briefcase in hand, smiling the professional smile of someone being paid well to facilitate something. "Mrs. Parker, wonderful to see you. Just a few signatures and we'll have everything properly organized." They were all looking at me expectantly, as if my signature were a formality rather than a choice. "I'd like to understand exactly what I'm signing." Hayes opened his briefcase. "Of course, this establishes a family trust with your husband as the primary trustee. It's quite standard. Protects the assets, provides tax advantages, ensures smooth transition." "Transition to what?" "Well, eventually to your children. Of course. Estate planning is about preparing for the future. Whose future?" The question hung in the air. I looked at my family, my husband, my son, my daughter, and saw something I'd never noticed before. They were all aligned, all on the same side of something, and I was on the outside. "Mom," Lily said gently, "this is good for all of us. It protects the family." "What about protecting me?" The silence was deafening. Richard cleared his throat. "Evelyn, you're being dramatic. This is standard financial planning." "Then why didn't you include me in the planning? Because you get anxious about money matters." "No, Richard. I get curious about money matters. There's a difference." Mark shifted uncomfortably. Mom, maybe you should just trust Dad on this. He knows what he's doing. Trust, the word my family used when they wanted me to stop asking questions. I need time to think, I said. Hayes snapped his briefcase shut. Of course, though I should mention that property values are fluctuating right now, and delays can sometimes impact. She said she needs time, Lily interrupted, surprising me. After Hayes left, my family scattered. Richard to his study, Mark to his car, Lily to her phone, checking messages that were more important than the conversation we'd just had. I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by furniture I'd chosen, books I'd read, photos I'd arranged. Everything in this room reflected my taste, my effort, my life. Yet somehow, I was being written out of decisions about my own future. That evening, I called Janet. Evelyn, it's late. Is everything okay? I need you to look at some legal documents. What kind of documents? Trust papers. Richard wants me to sign them. There was a pause. Without your attorney present? He says it's just standard planning. Evelyn, listen to me carefully. Don't sign anything until I've reviewed it. Can you bring the papers to my office tomorrow? Janet, what if I've been stupid about money all these years? What if Richard really does know better? Honey, you found 3 of your most profitable properties. You negotiated the lease agreements on 2 rental houses. You've been managing household finances for 40 years without a single late payment or overdraft. You're not stupid about money. You're just used to other people taking credit for your intelligence. After I hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen, listening to the house settle around me. Upstairs, Richard was watching television, probably assuming I'd come to my senses by morning. Mark was likely at some bar, spending money he'd borrowed from me. Lily was home with David, living in a house they'd bought with a down payment I'd helped provide. And I was here, alone, finally understanding that the people I'd spent my life serving had been planning my life without me. The trust papers lay on the counter where I'd left them. I picked them up and read them again, more carefully this time. Legal language designed to obscure, but I wasn't as naive as they believed. Property transferred, decision-making authority consolidated, my name present, but my power absent. I folded the papers and walked to my jewelry box, placing them beside the business cards I'd collected over the years. Tomorrow I would take them to Janet. Tonight I would sit with the growing realization that my family had been moving against me while I'd been busy taking care of them. The woman in the mirror looked back at me, 62 years old, tired but not defeated. Not yet. Surprise! The word exploded from 30 voices as I walked into what I thought was Lily's quiet birthday dinner. I stood frozen in the doorway of the country club's private dining room, taking in the scene. Extended family, neighbors, friends I hadn't seen in years, all gathered around tables decorated with photos from my life. My life. Happy 62nd birthday, Mom! Lily appeared beside me, beaming. Did we fool you? Birthday. I stared at the decorations, the cake, the smiling faces. My birthday had been last month. I'd spent it making dinner for Richard's business associates, while he forgot to even say the words. But my birthday... We know it's late, but coordinating everyone's schedules is impossible. Besides, this way it's really special. Special? A surprise party 6 weeks after my actual birthday, organized around everyone else's convenience. Evelyn! My sister Nancy approached with a tight hug. You look shocked. Lily did such a good job keeping it secret. I forced a smile as people began approaching. Neighbors praising what a wonderful family I had. Old friends marveling at how thoughtful my children were. Relatives commenting on how lucky I was to have people who cared so much. Lucky. I felt like I was watching my life through someone else's eyes. "Come on, Mom. Everyone wants to hear your speech," Mark said, guiding me toward the head table. Speech? You know, thanking everyone for coming, talking about how surprised you are. The usual stuff. The usual stuff. Because apparently, surprise parties were routine events in other people's lives. I found myself seated at the head table between Richard and Lily, facing a room full of people who'd given up their Saturday evening to celebrate me. The thoughtfulness of their presence warred with the strangeness of celebrating a birthday that had already passed, unacknowledged. "Before dinner," Richard announced, standing with his wineglass, "I'd like to say a few words about my wife." The room quieted, and I felt every eye on me as Richard began what sounded like a rehearsed speech. "Evelyn has been the heart of our family for 40 years. She's the one who keeps us all together, who makes everything work smoothly, who sacrifices her own needs for ours. Sacrifices." He said it like it was a choice I'd made rather than an expectation imposed on me. "She's the most selfless person I know," he continued. "Never asks for anything, never complains, always puts family first." The words washed over me, each one landing like a small weight. Selfless, never asks for anything, always puts family first. He was describing a saint, not a person. "To Evelyn." Richard raised his glass. "The woman who makes all our lives possible." "To Evelyn," the room chorused, glasses raised in my honor. I smiled and nodded, playing the role of the grateful birthday girl. But something cold was settling in my chest. Makes all our lives possible, as if I existed solely to enable other people's happiness. During dinner, conversations swirled around me. People telling stories about my cooking, my helpfulness, my availability whenever anyone needed anything. I heard myself described as wonderful, generous, always there when you need her. "Your mother is a treasure," Mrs. Henderson from down the street told Lily. "Always so giving." "She really is," Lily agreed. "We're so lucky to have her. Lucky to have me. Like I was a useful appliance, rather than a person with my own needs and desires." After the main course, Hayes appeared beside my chair, uninvited but somehow present at my own surprise party. "Mrs. Parker, wonderful party. Listen, about those trust documents. Hayes." My voice was sharper than I intended. "This is my birthday party." Of course. I just thought, with the family, all here, it might be convenient to get those signatures. Not tonight." He smiled his professional smile. "Tomorrow, then?" "No rush, but these things are better handled promptly." I looked around the room. At my family, my friends, the celebration of a life that felt increasingly like a performance I hadn't auditioned for. "Maybe next week," I said. Hayes's smile faltered slightly. "Well, perhaps I should speak with Richard." "You should speak with me. They're my documents to sign." The firmness in my voice surprised both of us. Hayes nodded and moved away, but I noticed him heading directly to Richard's side of the table. As dessert was served, a beautiful cake decorated with photos from my life, I found myself studying the images. There I was at graduations, weddings, holidays, family gatherings. In every photo I was present, smiling, supportive. But I looked like a supporting character in someone else's story. "Mom, will you cut the cake?" Sophie asked, appearing with a knife. I stood, and the room quieted again. This was my moment. The birthday girl cutting her cake, making a wish, receiving applause. The knife felt heavy in my hand as I looked out at the faces watching me, people who cared about me, People who appreciated me. People who saw me as wonderful, generous, selfless. People who had never once asked what I wanted. "Make a wish!" someone called out. I closed my eyes, the knife poised above the cake. What did I wish for? For 40 years I'd wished for my family's happiness, their success, their well-being. I'd wished for smooth family gatherings, for my children to thrive, for Richard to be proud of me. When had I stopped wishing for myself? I opened my eyes and cut the cake, listening to the applause, accepting the congratulations, playing my role perfectly. But something had shifted. Standing there with the knife in my hand, surrounded by people celebrating who they thought I was, I felt a strange clarity descending. They loved me for what I did, not for who I was. They needed me for my service, not my presence. They celebrated me for making their lives easier, not for having value in my own right. "Beautiful party, Lily," I heard someone say behind me. "Your mother must be so happy." Happy! I turned to look at Lily, who was glowing with pride at her successful surprise. "Did you enjoy it, Mom?" she asked eagerly. "It was very thoughtful," I said, which was true. It was thoughtful. It was also 6 weeks late, organized around everyone else's schedule, and designed to celebrate the version of me that made other people comfortable. As people began saying their goodbyes, thanking me for a lovely evening as if I'd hosted rather than been honored, I felt the familiar weight of invisible labor settling on my shoulders. I would help clean up, send thank you notes, store leftover cake, and organize the gifts. "Evelyn," Nancy approached as she was leaving. "What a wonderful family you have. They think the world of you." "Yes," I said, "they do." And they did think the world of me, as long as I remained the person who made their world possible, while never asking for a world of my own. That night, after the dishes were done and the decorations put away, I sat in my bedroom looking at the birthday, cards from the party, messages about what a special person I was, how much I meant to everyone, how lucky they were to know me. Lucky to know me. But did they actually know me? Did anyone in that room know what I dreamed about, what I feared, what I wanted for myself, rather than for them? I opened my jewelry box and pulled out Janet's business card. Tomorrow I would call her about the trust documents. But more than that, I would start asking a different question. Instead of, how can I make everyone else happy? I would ask, what would make me happy? It was a small change, but as I sat in the darkness of my bedroom, it felt revolutionary. "Janet, thank you for seeing me on such short notice." I slid the trust documents across her mahogany desk, my hand steadier than I'd expected. Janet's expression grew serious as she scanned the papers. "Evelyn, how long have you had these?" "Richard presented them to me last week. Said it was standard estate planning." "Standard?" Janet's eyebrows shot up. "This isn't standard anything. This is a complete transfer of property ownership." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "These documents don't just create a trust. They strip you of any decision-making authority over assets you helped acquire. Look here." She pointed to a paragraph dense with legal language. "Richard becomes the sole trustee with complete discretionary power." The words on the page began to swim. "Discretionary power over what?" "Everything. The rental properties, the investment accounts, even your personal bank accounts. Once you sign this, Richard can make any financial decision without consulting you." I felt the blood draining from my face. "But he said it was for tax benefits." "There are minimal tax benefits here, Evelyn. This is about control, not taxes." Janet leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Have you consulted with your own attorney about this? Richard said Hayes was handling everything. Hayes works for Richard, not for you. Evelyn, I need to ask you something difficult. Has Richard been pressuring you to sign quickly?" I thought about Hayes appearing at my birthday party, the urgency in Richard's voice, the way my children had all seemed aligned on this issue. "Yes," I whispered. Janet set the papers down. "I think we need to look at your financial situation more closely. Do you have access to your bank statements, property deeds, investment records?" I should. They're in Richard's study." "Should or do? When's the last time you actually reviewed them?" The question hit me like cold water. When was the last time? Richard had always handled the complicated financial matters while I managed the household budget. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Evelyn, I need you to listen to me carefully. Before you sign anything, we need to understand exactly what assets exist and how they're currently titled. Can you get copies of everything?" I nodded, though the task felt overwhelming. "Janet, what if I've been naive about money? What if Richard really is protecting me?" "Honey, protecting you would mean involving you in decisions about your own property, not excluding you from them." Janet reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. "You're one of the smartest women I know. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." That afternoon, I sat in Richard's study while he played golf, systematically photographing documents with my phone. Bank statements, property deeds, investment accounts. Papers I'd seen him handle but never examined myself. What I found made my hands shake. The rental property on Maple Street, the one I'd found, researched, and negotiated the purchase of, was titled solely in Richard's name. The downtown apartment building I'd insisted we buy despite his skepticism was also in his name only. Even our joint savings account required only his signature for major transactions. I'd been married for 40 years to a man who'd been systematically writing me out of our financial life. My phone rang. Lily's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, Mom. How are you feeling after the party?" "Fine," I managed. "Good. Listen, Dad mentioned you're having some concerns about the trust paperwork. I wanted to talk to you about that." My heart began racing. "What about it?" "Mom, you know Dad loves you, right? Everything he does is to protect our family." "Protect from what?" There was a pause. "Well, you know how complicated financial stuff can be. And with your memory issues." "My memory issues?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Mom, don't get upset. It's just that you've been forgetting things lately. Little things. Dad's worried about you." "What things, Lily?" "Well, you thought your birthday was last month when it was actually in March. My birthday is in March. It was March 15th. The party was 6 weeks late." Silence stretched across the phone line. "Mom, you're confused. Your birthday has always been in April." The lie hit me like a physical blow. I walked to my desk calendar, flipping back to March. There, in my own handwriting. My 62nd birthday. "Lily, I'm looking at my calendar right now. March 15th. Mom." Her voice carried a mixture of pity and frustration. "Maybe you should talk to Dr. Peterson about this. Memory problems can be serious at your age." Memory problems. They were gaslighting me about my own birthday. "I have to go," I said. "Mom, wait. About the trust papers. Dad really needs you to sign them this week. It's important for all of us." Important for all of them. Not for me. After hanging up, I sat staring at my calendar. March 15th, 1962. My birth date, written in my own hand on the day it happened every year for as long as I'd kept calendars. They were lying to me about my birthday to make me doubt my memory, making me question my own mind so I'd be more compliant about signing away my rights. I called Sophie. "Mom? You sound upset. Sophie, when is my birthday?" "March 15th. Why would you—" "Mom, what's wrong?" Relief flooded through me. Lily just told me my birthday is in April, that I was confused about the party being late. What? That's insane. Your birthday has always been March 15th. I have it in my phone, on my calendar. Mom, why would Lily say that? I don't know. But I was beginning to suspect. Mom, this is scary. Are they trying to make you think you're losing your memory? The question hung between us like a bridge I was afraid to cross. I need to ask you something, Sophie. The trust papers your father wants me to sign. Did you know about them? What trust papers? At least one of my children wasn't part of the conspiracy. Never mind. Sophie, I need you to promise me something. Don't tell anyone we had this conversation. Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on? I'm not sure yet, but I need time to figure it out. That evening, Richard returned from golf in good spirits, whistling as he hung up his clubs. "How was your day, dear?" he asked, kissing my cheek. "Fine, Richard, I've been thinking about the trust papers." His expression shifted slightly. "Good. Hayes can come by tomorrow if you're ready to sign. I'd like to understand them better first. Maybe we could go over them together." "Evelyn, we've already discussed this. Hayes explained everything. It's just standard planning. But I have some questions." "What kind of questions?" His voice carried a warning. "Well, for instance, why are all our properties titled only in your name?" Richard's face went blank. "What are you talking about?" "The Maple Street rental, the downtown apartments. I helped find those properties, but they're only in your name." "That's for tax purposes. Married couples often—" "Janet says that's not typical." "Janet!" His voice turned cold. "You discussed our private financial business with Janet?" "She's a lawyer, Richard. I wanted professional advice." "She's not our lawyer. Hayes is our lawyer." "Hayes works for you, not for me." We stared at each other across the kitchen, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never noticed before. Calculation. He was calculating how to handle me. "Evelyn, I'm concerned about you. First you were confused about your birthday. Now you're questioning financial arrangements that have been in place for years. Maybe we should make an appointment with Dr. Peterson." There it was. The suggestion that I was mentally incompetent, delivered with concern masking manipulation. I'm not confused, Richard. I'm asking questions. Questions that don't make sense. Evelyn, I've handled our finances successfully for 40 years. Why would you suddenly doubt that? Because I'm just now realizing I've never been included in the handling. His expression hardened. You've never been interested in financial details. Well, you've never allowed me to be interested. That's ridiculous. You could have asked about anything at any time. Could I? Because every time I've tried, you've told me not to worry about it, that it was too complicated, that you'd handle it. Because I was protecting you from stress. No, Richard. You were protecting yourself from questions. The silence stretched between us, filled with 40 years of unexamined assumptions. "I'm not signing the trust papers," I said quietly. "Evelyn." "Not until I understand exactly what I'd be signing away." Richard's face flushed. You're not signing away anything. You're protecting our family's future." "Whose future, Richard? Because from what I can see, these papers protect everyone's future, except mine." He stood up abruptly. "I don't know what Janet has put in your head, but this paranoia isn't healthy. I'm calling Dr. Peterson in the morning." "Call whoever you want. I'm not signing." That night I lay awake listening to Richard's steady breathing beside me. 40 years of marriage, and I was just now seeing the man I'd been sleeping next to. My phone buzzed softly. A text from Mark. "Mom, Dad says you're having some confusion about the family finances. We're all worried about you. Maybe it's time to let us handle the complicated stuff." Handle the complicated stuff. Like I was a child who couldn't be trusted with grown-up decisions. I deleted the text without responding and stared at the ceiling until dawn, finally understanding the true nature of my marriage and my family. They didn't see me as confused or forgetful. They saw me as inconvenient, and they were working together to make that inconvenience disappear. I waited until Richard left for his morning golf game before making my move. His study door creaked as I pushed it open, my heart hammering against my ribs. The filing cabinet was locked, but I knew Richard. After 40 years of marriage, I knew he kept the key in the same place he'd always kept important things, taped under his desk drawer. My hands shook as I pulled out file after file, spreading documents across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. And that's exactly what this felt like. Uncovering a crime against my own life. The first folder contained property deeds. Every single investment property we owned, 7 in total, was titled solely in Richard's name. Properties I'd found, researched, and helped finance with money from my inheritance when my mother died. The second folder was worse. Bank statements going back 5 years, showing systematic transfers from our joint account to accounts I'd never heard of. Richard Parker Trust Account, Parker Family Holdings, RP Investment LLC. My inheritance, $300,000 from my mother's estate, had been moved into accounts I couldn't access. The third folder made my knees weak. Insurance policies, retirement accounts, even the deed to our home. Everything structured to bypass me entirely in the event of Richard's death. Despite 40 years of contribution to our life together, I would inherit nothing. But the fourth folder was the revelation that changed everything. Inside were documents showing properties I didn't even know we owned. A commercial building in the downtown district, 3 rental houses in the university area, a small office complex on the north side of town. Properties worth over $2 million, purchased with my inheritance money and titled in Richard's name only. I photographed everything with trembling hands, my phone capturing evidence of a betrayal so systematic it had to have been planned for years. At the bottom of the folder, I found something that made me sit down hard in Richard's chair. A handwritten note in Richard's familiar script. E, becoming difficult about finances. Accelerate trust timeline. Consult Hayes about competency options if signature resistance continues. Competency options. They weren't just planning to take my property. They were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent if I refused to cooperate. My phone rang, making me jump. Janet's name on the screen. Evelyn. "I've been researching the trust documents you showed me. We need to talk immediately." "I'm listening." Not over the phone. "Can you come to my office? And Evelyn, bring any financial documents you can find. All of them." An hour later, I sat across from Janet's desk, watching her face grow darker as she reviewed the photos. On my phone. Jesus Christ, Evelyn! This isn't just financial abuse. This is orchestrated theft. Theft? Your inheritance money was used to purchase properties titled solely in his name. That's conversion of marital assets. And look at this. She pointed to one of the bank statements. He's been systematically moving money into accounts you can't access. But we're married. Isn't his money my money? Not when it's structured to deliberately exclude you, and definitely not when it involves your separate inheritance. Janet leaned back in her chair. Evelyn, how much do you think you're worth? I don't know. Richard always said we were comfortable but not wealthy. Based on these documents, you're worth over $3 million. Or you should be. The number hit me like a physical blow. $3 million? Property values, investment accounts, business holdings. But it's all structured so that you have no access or control. Janet's voice was grim. Evelyn, they're not just trying to control your money. They're trying to steal it. But surely Richard wouldn't. Richard has been planning this for years. Look at the dates on these transfers. They started right after your mother died and left you that inheritance. I stared at the documents spread across Janet's desk, seeing my entire marriage in a new light. Not a partnership, but a long con. What about my children? Surely they don't know. The trust documents name them as beneficiaries. They know, Evelyn. They all know. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. My own children conspiring to rob me while I cooked their meals and cleaned their messes. What can I do? Janet was quiet for a long moment. Legally, we have options. But Evelyn, I need to ask you something important. What do you want to happen here? I want my property back. I want control over my own money. That's one option. But there's something else you should consider. Janet pulled out a fresh legal pad. You have leverage they don't know about. What do you mean? They've been so focused on hiding assets from you that they've made mistakes. Sloppy documentation, improper transfers, potential tax violations. You could not only get your property back, you could take a lot more. I thought about Richard's morning golf games, Mark's constant requests for money, Lily's assumption that I would always be available to solve her problems. Tell me about the leverage. Janet smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. First, the inheritance money was your separate property. Using it to purchase assets titled only in Richard's name is conversion. Theft, essentially. Second, the systematic exclusion of you from marital assets suggests intentional fraud. Third, and this is the big one, none of these property transfers were properly disclosed on your joint tax returns. What does that mean? It means Richard has been committing tax fraud for years. The IRS takes a very dim view of unreported income from rental properties. I felt something shifting inside me, a sensation I hadn't experienced in decades. Power. What would you recommend? We could file for divorce and go after everything. Asset forfeiture, tax fraud investigation, the works. Evelyn, you could end up with far more than half of everything. And if I don't want to destroy my family completely? Then we use the leverage differently. We force full disclosure, proper asset division, and guarantees about your future security. But Evelyn, they've been planning to destroy you financially. Don't you think you deserve justice? I looked out Janet's office window at the city below, thinking about the properties I'd helped find and research, now titled in my husband's name, the inheritance I'd trusted him to manage, now hidden in accounts I couldn't access. The children I'd raised, now plotting to benefit from my exclusion. I need time to think. Evelyn, time may not be on your side. If they're talking about competency hearings, they could move quickly. We need to be prepared. What kind of preparation? Janet opened her desk drawer and pulled out a business card. Thomas Reed. He's a private investigator who specializes in financial crimes. If we're going to fight this, we need documentation of everything. Every hidden asset, every fraudulent transfer, every lie they've told. I took the card, feeling its weight in my hand. There's something else, Janet continued. Your birthday party. The timing wasn't coincidental. They threw you a public celebration right before pressuring you to sign away your rights. It's a classic manipulation tactic. Make you feel loved and appreciated, then use that emotion to get compliance. The party suddenly made sense in a horrible new way. Not a celebration of me, but a setup for my own financial destruction. Janet, what if I'd signed those papers? You'd have nothing. No property, no income, no legal standing to challenge their decisions. If they'd succeeded in having you declared incompetent afterward, you'd have been completely at their mercy. I sat in the silence of Janet's office, absorbing the magnitude of what had almost happened to me. My family, the people I'd spent my life serving, had been systematically planning my destruction. I want to fight back, I said quietly. Are you sure? This won't be easy. They'll try to discredit you, claim you're mentally unstable, turn people against you. They're already doing that. Janet nodded grimly. Then we fight. But Evelyn, we fight to win. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the note in Richard's handwriting, the competency options, the systematic theft of my inheritance. I thought about Lily gaslighting me about my own birthday, and Mark treating me like an ATM with feelings. Yes, I said, I'm prepared to win. Thomas Reed looked nothing like what I'd expected from a private investigator. Mid-50s, wearing a cardigan and wire-rimmed glasses, he could have been a college professor or librarian. Mrs. Parker, Janet briefed me on your situation. I specialize in cases like yours. Family financial fraud, hidden assets, systematic theft. What we're looking at here is quite sophisticated. We sat in a coffee shop across town. Documents spread between us like battle plans. How sophisticated? I asked. Your husband has been planning this for at least a decade. Look at this timeline. Thomas pulled out a handwritten chart. 2014, your mother dies, leaves you $300,000. Within 6 months, Richard starts creating separate business entities. 2015, first property purchase using your inheritance, titled in his name only. 2016, establishment of multiple trusts and LLCs. The systematic nature of the betrayal took my breath away. The good news, Thomas continued, is that he's made mistakes. Criminals always do, especially when they think they're smarter than they are. What kind of mistakes? Tax evasion primarily. He's been underreporting rental income for years. Also, some of the business entities are improperly structured. Shell, companies with no legitimate business purpose. The IRS takes a dim view of that. I sipped my coffee, trying to process the enormity of what I was learning about my own life. What do we do now? We gather evidence systematically. Document every hidden asset, every fraudulent transfer, every lie. Then we present your family with a choice: voluntary asset division or criminal prosecution. You think they'd face criminal charges? Mrs. Parker, your husband has committed multiple felonies: tax fraud, theft of marital property, potential elder abuse. Your children could be charged as co-conspirators if they knowingly participated. The weight of that information settled over me. My family hadn't just betrayed me. They'd committed crimes against me. What do you need from me? Thomas handed me a small device that looked like a thumb drive. This is a digital recorder. When they pressure you about the trust papers again, and they will, I need you to record the conversations, especially if they mention your supposed memory problems or competency issues. Is that legal? In this state, you only need one party, consent. Since you're part of the conversation, you can record it. That afternoon, I implemented the first phase of what Thomas called defensive positioning. I opened my own bank account at a different bank, one Richard had never used. I transferred a small amount of money from our joint account, not enough to trigger his attention, but enough to establish my financial independence. Next, I visited 3 of our rental properties, introducing myself to tenants as the co-owner. Most of them had never met me, dealing only with Richard or his property management company. I made sure they had my contact information and subtly mentioned that I was becoming more involved in the business side of things. The responses were illuminating. "Oh, you're Mr. Parker's wife," the tenant at the Maple Street property said. He never mentioned he was married. I just assumed he was a bachelor investor. A bachelor investor. Richard had been presenting himself as single for years while collecting rent on properties purchased with my money. At the downtown apartment building, I met with the property manager, a woman named Carol who'd been handling the day-to-day operations. "Mrs. Parker, what a surprise. I don't think I've ever seen you here before." "I'm becoming more involved in our investments," I said carefully. "Well, that's wonderful. You know, I've always thought it was odd that Mr. Parker never mentioned having a partner. The paperwork all shows him as the sole owner. Does it? That seems unusual for a married couple." Carol's expression grew thoughtful. "Now that you mention it, yes. Most of our married clients have both names on the ownership documents for liability protection, if nothing else." I left that meeting with Carol's business card and a promise to stay in touch. Another ally, another witness to Richard's deception. That evening, Richard came home from his golf game in an unusually good mood. "Beautiful day on the course," he announced, kissing my cheek. "Oh, Hayes called. He's available tomorrow afternoon to finalize those trust papers." I reached into my pocket and activated the recording device Thomas had given me. "Richard, I'm still not comfortable signing those papers." His expression shifted immediately. "Evelyn, we've discussed this. The family needs those documents. Processed. What family needs or what you want. Don't be difficult. This is important." "Important for whom? I've been looking at the documents more carefully, and I don't understand why I'm signing away all decision-making authority." Richard's face flushed. "You're not signing away anything. You're protecting our assets. By giving you complete control over them." "Evelyn, you're not thinking clearly about this. Maybe we should schedule that appointment with Dr. Peterson after all." There it was, the threat to have me declared incompetent, captured on digital recording. "I'm thinking very clearly, Richard. Clearer than I have in years." "Are you?" "Because frankly, your behavior lately has been concerning. The confusion about your birthday, the paranoia about our finances, this sudden hostility toward family decisions. Hostility toward decisions made without me, you mean?" "Decisions made for your benefit." "Whose benefit, Richard? Because it looks to me like these decisions benefit everyone, except me." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with Richard growing increasingly agitated and making increasingly clear threats about my mental competency, all of it recorded. Later that night, I called Sophie. "Mom, you sound upset again." "Sophie, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Okay. Have you ever discussed my mental state with your father? Or siblings? Have they suggested I'm becoming forgetful or confused? There was a long pause. Mom, why would you ask that? Please just answer me. Dad did mention that you seemed confused about some things lately, and Lily said you were having trouble remembering dates. What did you tell them? That you seemed fine to me. Mom, what's going on? You're scaring me. I'm scared too, sweetheart. I think your father and siblings are trying to make me seem mentally incompetent, so I'll sign legal documents without understanding them. The silence stretched across the phone line. Mom, that's a serious accusation. I know. Sophie, if something happens to me, if I suddenly seem confused or if there's talk about me needing care, I need you to remember this conversation. Can you do that? Mom, you're really frightening me now. I'm sorry, but I need you to promise me. I promise, but Mom, maybe you should come stay with me for a while, until you figure out what's happening. The offer was tempting, but I couldn't run. Not when I was finally beginning to understand the scope of what had been done to me. I'll be fine, Sophie, but remember our conversation. The next morning, I met with Janet to review the recordings from the previous evening. This is excellent, she said, listening to Richard's threats about competency hearings. Clear evidence of coercion and potential elder abuse. What's our next move? We continue gathering evidence while you maintain the appearance of cooperation. Don't sign anything, but don't let them know you're building a case. Can you do that? I thought about the woman who'd spent 40 years accommodating everyone else's needs while ignoring her own. That woman could definitely maintain an appearance while planning something else entirely. Yes, I said. I can do that. What they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to learn about me, was that I was very good at keeping secrets when I needed to. And now, for the first time in my life, I needed to. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning when Richard came storming into the kitchen, waving his phone like a weapon. Evelyn, did you go to the Maple Street property yesterday? I looked up from my coffee, keeping my expression neutral. I stopped by to check on things. Why? The tenant called me. Said the landlord's wife had visited and left her contact information. I am the landlord's wife. You know what I mean. You're interfering with the property management. I'm taking an interest in our investments. Richard's face was flushed with anger. Those properties don't need your interest. They need professional management. Professional management by you mean? By people who understand real estate, yes. I activated the recording device in my pocket. Richard, I helped find most of those properties. I researched the neighborhoods, analyzed the rental markets, negotiated purchase prices. How is that not understanding real estate? That was years ago. Things are more complicated now. What's complicated about collecting rent and maintaining properties? Evelyn, you're being naive. There are tax implications, liability issues, market fluctuations. Then explain them to me. I don't have time to give you an education in real estate finance. But you have time to make decisions about my property without consulting me. The words hung between us like a gauntlet thrown down. Richard's expression shifted from anger to something more calculating. Your property? Evelyn, we've been married 40 years. There is no your property and my property. Then why are all the deeds in your name only? I watched his face carefully, saw the moment he realized I'd been doing more than just visiting tenants. That's for tax and liability purposes. Standard practice for married couples. Is it standard practice to exclude your spouse from all financial decisions? I don't exclude you. You've never shown interest in the business side. I've never been allowed to show interest. Richard set his phone on the counter with deliberate precision. Evelyn, I'm concerned about this sudden obsession with our finances. It's not healthy. What's not healthy is discovering that my husband has been making decisions about my inheritance without telling me. The color drained from his face. What are you talking about? My mother's $300,000, Richard. The money you said you'd invest safely for both of us. Where is it? It's invested in the properties in various accounts. Which accounts? Which properties? Show me. Evelyn, you're being paranoid. Am I? Or am I being smart for the first time in 40 years? That afternoon, the situation escalated. Mark appeared at the door, unannounced and agitated. Mom, we need to talk. About what? Dad says you're having some kind of breakdown. Accusing him of stealing money, harassing tenants, acting paranoid. I led him to the living room, the recording device in my pocket capturing everything. I'm not having a breakdown, Mark. I'm asking questions about my own property. Your property? Mom, you don't have property. Dad handles all the investments. With my money, Mark. My inheritance from Grandma. Mark's expression grew uncomfortable. Look, Mom, maybe you should see someone. Talk to a professional about what you're going through. What I'm going through is discovering that my family has been lying to me for years. Nobody's lying to you. You're confused. About what, specifically? About how things work. About who owns what. About your role in all this. My role, the phrase was revealing. What is my role? Mark, you're the mom, the wife. You take care of everyone. And what do I get in return? You get taken care of too. How? By being excluded from decisions about my own money. Mark stood up, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Mom, I think you should sign those trust papers. Let Dad handle the complicated stuff like he always has. And if I don't, then maybe we need to look at other options. What kind of options? Professional care. Maybe you need help managing your daily life. There it was, the threat, delivered by my own son. That evening, Lily called. Mom, Mark told me about your conversation today. I'm worried about you. Are you worried about me? Or worried about the trust papers? Both. Mom, this paranoia isn't like you. Maybe the real me is someone you've never bothered to know. That's not fair. We all love you. Do you? Or do you love what I do for you? Silence stretched across the phone line. Mom, I think you should come stay with me for a few days. Clear your head. So you can pressure me to sign papers away from home? So I can take care of you while you're going through whatever this is. What I'm going through is learning the truth about my own life. The truth according to whom? Janet? Mom, she's filling your head with crazy ideas. The truth according to bank statements and property deeds, Lily. Documents don't lie. People can misinterpret documents. People can also steal money and lie about it. Another long silence. Mom, if you don't sign those papers soon, we might have to take other steps. What steps? Legal steps, to protect you from making bad decisions. The threat was clear. Sign the papers, or face a competency hearing. I see, I said quietly. I hope you do. We're trying to help you, Mom. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." After she hung up, I sat in the darkness of my living room, processing what had just happened. My children weren't concerned about my mental health. They were concerned about their inheritance, and they were willing to have me declared incompetent to protect it. The next morning, I called Thomas Reed. "They're escalating," I told him, "threatening competency hearings, professional care, legal action." "Good," Thomas said, surprising me. "Good?" The more desperate they get, the more mistakes they make. And, Mrs. Parker, we found some interesting things. "What kind of things?" "Your husband has been underreporting rental income by approximately $50,000 per year for the past 5 years. That's felony tax evasion. Also, 3 of the properties were purchased through fraudulent loan applications. He claimed to be single with no dependents." "What does that mean?" "It means we have them. The question is what you want to do with that information." I thought about Richard's threats, Mark's condescension, Lily's manipulation. I thought about 40 years of being invisible, of having my contributions ignored and my intelligence dismissed. I want them to know that they picked the wrong woman to steal from. Then it's time to make our move. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done in 40 years of marriage. I went to Richard's golf club and walked into the men's grill, where he was having drinks with Hayes and 2 other men. The conversation stopped when I appeared. "Evelyn!" Richard's voice was tight with embarrassment. "What are you doing here?" "I came to return these," I said, placing the trust papers on the table in front of him. "I won't be signing them." "This isn't the place." "This is exactly the place, Richard. In front of witnesses." I looked around the table at the men staring at me. "Gentlemen, my husband has been trying to get me to sign papers that would give him complete control over property purchased with my inheritance. Without my knowledge, he's titled millions of dollars in assets, solely in his name." Hayes started to speak, but I cut him off. "Mr. Hayes, you've been pressuring me to sign documents you know would strip me of my legal rights. That's called elder abuse. And it's a felony." Richard's face was purple with rage and humiliation. "Evelyn, you're making a scene." "Yes, I am. Because apparently making a scene is the only way to get your attention." I turned and walked out of the men's grill, leaving behind 40 years of silence and compliance. The war had begun. The meeting was set for 10 o'clock Tuesday morning. In Janet's conference room, Richard arrived with Hayes and a briefcase full of what I assumed were legal threats. Mark and Lily flanked them like bodyguards, their faces set in expressions I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating. Nothing like the children I'd raised. I sat across from them with Janet beside me and Thomas Reed at the head of the table, a stack of documents in front of him that represented months of investigation. "Thank you all for coming," Janet began. "We're here to discuss the financial arrangements in the Parker marriage and to address some concerning irregularities we've discovered." Richard leaned forward. "Before we start, I want to state for the record that my wife has been exhibiting signs of mental decline. Her recent behavior has been erratic and paranoid." "Has it?" Thomas asked mildly. "Let's examine that claim." He opened the first folder and spread photographs across the conference table. Property deeds, bank statements, tax returns, all the evidence of Richard's systematic theft. These documents show that Richard Parker has, over the past 10 years, systematically transferred marital assets into accounts and properties titled solely in his name, using funds from his wife's inheritance. Hayes cleared his throat. "That's a mischaracterization. These are standard asset protection strategies." "Standard?" Thomas interrupted. "Let's look at the tax implications." He pulled out another set of documents. Mr. Parker has been underreporting rental income by approximately $250,000 over 5 years. That's felony tax evasion. I watched Richard's face go pale. Furthermore, Thomas continued, 3 of these properties were purchased using fraudulent loan applications where Mr. Parker claimed to be unmarried with no dependents. That's impossible, Lily said, but her voice was shaking. Is it? Thomas slid a loan application across the table. This is your father's signature, Ms. Parker. Notice the marital status box marked single. Mark grabbed the paper. This could be a mistake. All 3 applications contain the same mistake. That's not error. That's fraud. Janet leaned forward. The question now is how we resolve this situation. Mrs. Parker has several options. What kind of options? Hayes asked, his professional composure finally cracking. Criminal prosecution for tax evasion and loan fraud, civil action for theft of marital property, or... Janet paused dramatically. Voluntary restitution and proper asset division. The silence stretched across the conference room like a taut wire. You're bluffing, Richard said finally. Thomas smiled and pulled out a final folder. IRS Form 349A, Information Referral. I can file this today, triggering a criminal investigation into your tax returns for the past 7 years. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I watched my husband, the man I'd lived with for 40 years, realize that his house of cards was collapsing. What do you want? He asked quietly. Janet pulled out a prepared document. Full disclosure of all assets, proper titling of marital property, establishment of Mrs. Parker's independent financial accounts, and assurance that there will be no further attempts to question her mental competency. And if we agree to this, the criminal referrals remain unfiled. This stays a family matter. Lily looked like she was going to be sick. Mom, you can't be serious about this. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When had she become someone who would conspire to steal from her own mother? I'm completely serious, Lily, for the first time in my life. But we're family, are we? Because family members don't usually plot to steal from each other. I kept my voice steady, matter of fact. Family members don't threaten competency, hearings to force signatures on legal documents. Mark slammed his hand on the table. We were trying to protect you. From what? From having control over my own money? From making mistakes? From being taken advantage of? I almost laughed. The only people taking advantage of me are sitting at this table. Hayes tried to regain control of the situation. Mrs. Parker, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of these documents. Mr. Hayes, Thomas interrupted, would you like me to explain to your State Bar Association how you've been pressuring an elderly client to sign documents that would strip her of her property rights? The color drained from Hayes's face. Now, Janet continued, let's discuss terms. Mrs. Parker is willing to forego criminal prosecution in exchange for immediate remediation. She slid a document across the table. This agreement requires full asset disclosure, proper retitling of marital property, and establishment of Mrs. Parker's independent accounts within 30 days. Richard picked up the papers with shaking hands. And if we don't agree? Thomas leaned back in his chair. Then Mrs. Parker files for divorce, seeks criminal prosecution, and pursues full asset recovery through the courts. Your choice. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my husband, this man I'd lived with for 40 years, weigh his options like a cornered animal. There's something else? I said quietly. Everyone looked at me. The rental properties on Maple Street and Oak Avenue. The ones purchased with my inheritance money. I've already contacted the tenants. They know their rent checks should be made out to me from now on. Richard's face went white. You can't do that. I can, and I did. Those properties were purchased with my money. The rental income belongs to me. The leases are in my name. The leases are fraudulent if they were signed by someone who wasn't the legal owner of the property. Thomas smiled. Another potential felony charge. Lily was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Mom, how did you know how to do all this? For the first time in the meeting, I smiled. Lily, I've been managing household finances, researching investments, and solving problems for 40 years. Did you think I was just sitting around doing nothing all that time? But you never acted like you knew about business stuff. I never acted like a lot of things. That doesn't mean I didn't know them. Mark was reading through the settlement agreement, his face growing paler with each page. This gives you half of everything. Actually, it gives me what's legally mine. The properties purchased with my inheritance, the income from those properties, and my fair share of marital assets accumulated during our marriage. That's millions of dollars, he whispered. Yes, it is. Hayes cleared his throat. Mrs. Parker, perhaps we could negotiate some modifications to these terms. No. My voice was firm. These terms are non-negotiable. Sign the agreement by Friday, or face the consequences. Richard looked at his children, then at Hayes, then finally at me. And if we sign, this all stays private? As long as you honor the agreement and never again question my mental competency or attempt to manipulate me into signing away my rights. And our relationship? Our marriage? I considered the question carefully. Richard, we'll have to see. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. The meeting ended with my family leaving in stunned silence, the unsigned agreement in Richard's briefcase like a ticking bomb. 3 days later, the signed documents appeared on Janet's desk. No phone calls, no negotiations, no dramatic confrontations. Just signatures on paper, acknowledging what had always been true. I was not the helpless woman they'd imagined me to be. The property transfers took 2 weeks. Watching my name appear on deeds and bank statements felt surreal, like waking up from a 40-year dream. For the first time since my mother died, I could see my own financial security spelled out in black and white. Richard moved into the guest bedroom without discussion. We spoke politely about practical matters, whose turn it was to take out the trash, whether we needed groceries. But the easy familiarity of 4 decades was gone. We were strangers sharing a house, and maybe we always had been. The children's reactions varied. Mark avoided me entirely, nursing his wounded pride and diminished inheritance expectations. Lily attempted a few awkward phone calls, testing whether our mother-daughter relationship could survive what she saw as my betrayal. Only Sophie, my middle daughter who'd remained neutral throughout the conflict, seemed genuinely interested in understanding what had happened. Mom, I had no idea, she said during a quiet coffee visit. About any of it. The money, the properties, how they were treating you. I didn't want you to know. I thought I was protecting all of you by keeping the peace. But you were protecting us while they were. Were stealing from you? The word still sounded harsh, but I'd accepted its accuracy. Yes. I'm so sorry. I should have seen it. Sophie, you couldn't have seen what I worked so hard to hide. I spent 40 years making everything look perfect from the outside. She studied my face. Do you regret it? The confrontation, I mean. breaking up the family? I considered her question carefully. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret standing up for myself. For the first time in my adult life, I have control over my own security and my own choices. What happens now? Now I figure out who I am when I'm not trying to make everyone else comfortable. The strangest part of my new reality was the silence. Not the oppressive silence of being ignored, but the peaceful silence of not having to manage everyone else's emotions. I could drink my morning coffee without wondering if Richard was in a good mood. I could make dinner plans without coordinating 4 different schedules. I could choose what to watch on television without negotiating competing preferences. For the first time in memory, my time was my own. I started small. Painting classes on Tuesday mornings, a book club at the library, volunteer work at the community garden. Each activity was something I chose for myself, not because it served someone else's needs or expectations. The rental properties, now properly titled in my name, provided steady income that I managed through a property management company Janet recommended. No more collecting rent personally. No more middle-of-the-night calls about broken water heaters. Professional management, like Richard had always claimed to provide but never actually delivered. 3 months after the confrontation, I made a decision that surprised even me. I filed for divorce. Not out of anger. That had faded into something more like disappointment. But because I realized that staying married to Richard would mean continuing to live a lie. He'd shown me who he was when he thought I was powerless, and I couldn't unknow that truth. The divorce was quiet, handled through lawyers with minimal drama. Richard kept the house. I'd grown tired of its memories, anyway, and I bought a smaller place near the downtown area, within walking distance of my new activities and interests. My children's reactions to the divorce were mixed, but predictable. Mark blamed me for destroying the family. Lily worried about appearances and what people would think. Sophie supported my decision and helped me move. "Mom," she said as we arranged furniture in my new living room, "you seem different, happier." I feel different. For 40 years I measured my worth by how well I took care of everyone else. Now I'm learning to take care of myself. Do you miss it? Taking care of all of us? I thought about the question seriously. I miss the feeling of being needed, but I don't miss feeling invisible. 1 year after the confrontation in Janet's conference room, I received an unexpected phone call from Mark. "Mom, it's me." "Hello, Mark. I wanted to talk to you. If that's okay?" "Of course it's okay." "I've been thinking about everything that happened, about what we did, to you." I waited. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "We were all wrong. I didn't see it then, but I see it now." "What changed?" "Sarah left me." Sarah was his wife of 15 years. "I'm sorry to hear that. She said I treated her the way we treated you. Like she was invisible. Like her contributions didn't matter." His voice was thick with emotion. "She was right. I see." "Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. What we took from you wasn't just money. It was respect, recognition, basic human dignity." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Thank you for saying that, Mark. Would it be okay if I visited sometime? I'd like to try to get to know you. The real you, not the version of you that existed to serve us." "I'd like that." 6 months later, I hosted Thanksgiving dinner in my new home. Not the elaborate affair I used to orchestrate, with multiple courses and perfect presentation. Just a simple meal around my small dining table. Sophie came with her family. Mark came alone, still navigating his divorce. Even Lily showed up, tentative but present. Richard wasn't invited. As we sat around the table passing dishes and sharing conversation, I realized something profound. This felt more like family than any gathering in my old house ever had, because these people were choosing to be here with me, not because I'd guilt-tripped or manipulated or martyred myself into their presence. They were here because they wanted to know me. After dinner, as we cleaned dishes together, Lily approached me hesitantly. "Mom, I owe you an apology." "You don't owe me anything, Lily." "Yes, I do. I participated in something terrible, and I did it because I was greedy and selfish, and I thought you were weak." "What do you think now?" "I think you're the strongest person I know, and I think I have a lot to learn about being the kind of woman you are." That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat in my comfortable chair by the window, looking out at the street where people walked their dogs and children played on bicycles. Normal people living normal lives, not performing for anyone, or sacrificing themselves for others' comfort. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, silent, invisible, taken for granted. Then I thought about the woman I was now, speaking up, taking space, commanding respect. The transformation hadn't been revenge, though it might have looked like it from the outside. It had been recognition. Recognition of my own worth, my own intelligence, my own right to exist as more than a shadow in other people's lives. I was 63 years old, and for the first time, I was truly living. Tomorrow I had plans with Janet to look at a small investment property downtown. Not because I needed the money, but because I enjoyed the challenge of evaluating real estate and making smart financial decisions. Next week, I was starting Spanish classes at the community college, not because anyone expected it of me, but because I'd always wanted to travel to South America, and now I could. Next month, I was hosting a dinner party for my book club, not to impress anyone or fulfill an obligation, but because I enjoyed their company and wanted to share my space with people who saw and appreciated me. These were small things, ordinary things, but they were mine, and that made all the difference. The girl who'd been taught to disappear had finally learned how to be seen. The woman who'd spent 40 years in the shadows had stepped into the light. I was no longer invisible. I was Evelyn Parker, and I was enough. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, remember that it's never too late to reclaim your worth. You deserve to be seen, heard, and valued for who you truly are. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of transformation and resilience. Until next time, remember, you are not a shadow in someone else's story. You are the author of your own.